On some evenings in a man's life, he becomes acutely aware that he is a guest and does not belong. In a society where every look and every word are accepted, his own marriage, every smirk serves as a reminder that he is the stranger. That evening, while we were seated in an outrageously expensive restaurant with my woman and her family, I could feel the richness solidify in my bones. Candlelit tables covered in immaculate white, chandeliers overhead, servers moving like shadows in black uniforms carrying plates of steak, more expensive than my car payment. If I had my way, we'd be dining at a comfortable mid-range steakhouse, where I could talk about luxury brands and expensive handbags without having to pretend. Resorts for vacations? That was never my choice. Because Claire, my wife, was in her element, seated between her mother, Eleanor, and her sister, Ivy. Both dressed in outfits that appeared modest, but were deceptively expensive. Claire's father, Charles, sat across from me, a man whose presence always felt heavy, his expression unreadable as he sipped his drink. It felt more like a board meeting than a family gathering. Nevertheless, I ignored Eleanor's subtle jabs and focused on my steak. She had been criticizing me all night, urging me to stay at my job. I nodded, barely looking up. Her voice was filled with polite disdain. "I've heard they're firing people in your industry. You must be concerned." I swallowed my irritation with a sip of water. Claire never stood up for me. Instead, she smirked, twirling the stem of her wine glass between her fingers. Ivy laughed. "Working so hard and still not enough? That must be exhausting." Charles just sat there. And then the waiter arrived. I should have seen it coming. We had agreed to split the bill, so I didn't reach for the little leather folder on the table. I was already irritated, forced to endure this charade, but at least I wouldn't have to pay for it all. Then Claire did something that made me feel sick. She shoved the bill toward me. "Pay it," she said, lightheartedly. I scowled. I thought we were splitting it. She didn't laugh like she used to when we first met. Instead, she smiled. The cold, practiced kind that made my skin crawl. "If you don't like it, get a divorce. You're not part of this family anyway." It felt like a slap. I looked up at her, then at Eleanor, who just watched. Ivy bit her lip, holding back laughter. Charles? He just lifted his glass, and in that moment, I knew they had planned this. I looked down at the bill. $8,800. A meal I barely ate. A night designed to humiliate me. My jaw clenched. My fingers dug into the table. The expensive setup of the restaurant, the chandeliers, the overpriced wine, the imported seafood. Everything disgusted me. I looked at Claire again, searching for any sign that this was a joke. But she just stared back. Fearless. I felt like everyone in the restaurant was watching me. I could have walked out, left them to figure it out. But I knew what would happen if I did. The story would change. I'd become the villain, the pitiful husband who abandoned his wife, leaving her family to pay a bill that I should have been able to afford. So I took out my card. I paid. And when the receipt was signed, I stood up, without a word. Without a glance at Claire, Eleanor, or Ivy. I just walked out as I stepped. Into the cold night air, I heard them laughing behind me. Predictable, they called me. But my hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. For years, I had pushed myself, testing how much I could endure before I broke. Tonight, I finally did. I walked to my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My pulse raced. I couldn't go home. Not yet. Because home wasn't home anymore. It was a trap. A place where I was nothing more than a salary, a springboard for Claire and her family to climb higher. I replayed the dinner in my mind. The way she threw the bill at me. "Go ahead and pay it." She had said, "If you don't like it, get a divorce." The words burned. I should have left her years ago. I drove through the city, my anger growing with every passing streetlight. Then, my phone buzzed. Claire, I ignored it. Second ring, third, fourth. On the fifth, I answered. My voice was cold, but hers. For the first time that night, she didn't sound arrogant. She sounded afraid. "Come home. Now." I should have hung up. Let her sit in whatever mess she had made for herself. But something in her voice made me pause. Why? A silence. Then, someone broke in. And then, a click. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding. Was this another manipulation? A game to make me come back? But no. Claire never sounded like that. Fear. She had never needed me before. Now, she was begging. I made a U-turn. When I pulled into the driveway, my tires screeched against the pavement. The house was dark. Only the faint glow of the porch light remained. Claire stood outside, barefoot, arms wrapped around herself. Her silk dress crumpled, her hair disheveled. The moment she saw my car, she ran to me. "Thank God," she whispered, clutching my arm. I said nothing, just scanned the house. Something felt wrong. "What happened?" My voice was steady. She swallowed. "I was upstairs getting dressed when I heard something downstairs. Then the power went out." I frowned. She nodded. "I tried turning the lights back on. Nothing worked, so I grabbed my phone and hid in the closet." Claire was a lot of things. Manipulative, selfish, but a liar when she was scared? No, she was genuinely afraid. I reached for the door handle. It turned too easily, unlocked. Claire never left the door unlocked. She grabbed my wrist. "Don't go in. Call the police." I ignored her. The silence inside was suffocating. My footsteps sounded too loud. I moved through the house, checking every room, the kitchen, the living room, nothing. Then, the bedroom. My stomach dropped. Claire's jewelry box was open, empty, her purse overturned. The safe? Forced open. She gasped behind me. "My money! It's all gone!" I turned to face her, but I already knew. This wasn't a random burglary. No windows were broken. No forced entry. Whoever did this. Claire knew them. I stepped closer. "Who did this?" She hesitated, looked at the door like she wanted to run. "You're not going anywhere," I told her. Her shoulders slumped. Then, in a whisper, "Vincent." See, name sent a chill down my spine. "Who the hell is Vincent?" She didn't answer immediately. When she finally did, it hit me like a hammer. "He's someone I owe money to." My breath left me in a slow, cold exhale. "How much?" Silence. Then, 50 million. The air left the room. My lungs felt like they had been punched. 50 million. Ran a hand through my hair, staring at her. "What the hell did you do, Claire?" She bit her lip, and for the first time that night, she couldn't lie. "It appears, from where I'm standing, that you were hoping everything would miraculously go away." But she turned her head away. I knew our marriage was dead when she answered in quiet. Not because of the money or the robbery, but because I had lost faith in her. What's broken is nearly impossible to repair. So I turned and moved toward the door. Her voice trembled. "Are you going?" As if I had spoken. I wasn't sure what I would do if I stayed in this place any longer, because Claire had deceived me. She had treated me like an ATM and dragged me into her mess. And now there was someone scary following her, which meant they were after me too. I went outside. The street was unnaturally quiet, the cool night air slapping my face. A black SUV sat at the end of the street, headlights off. My spine tingled. I turned back toward the house. My thoughts raced about Claire, about how she had lost $50,000 gambling, how she had put us in danger, and worst of all, this was only the beginning. I stood outside the house, staring at the SUV, unsure of how bad things were going. The SUV didn't move. I sat there, heartbeat racing. Claire's confession pressed against my chest. 50 grand. She never thought to tell me when she owed someone $50,000. Even though she knew she couldn't repay it, she borrowed money anyway. And now, our house had been robbed. We were being watched. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about survival. My thoughts spun. I had two choices. Get out before this disaster pulled me under. Or go inside and see just how far Claire had buried herself. I hated that I still had feelings for her. I hated it. I went back inside. Claire stood in the bedroom where I left her, staring at the empty jewelry box. The woman who had mocked me over dinner now looked smaller, not pushing, not confident. The $8,800 charge she shoved at me like a joke now seemed like something else entirely. Claire was scared. She gripped the dresser's edge. Check your accounts. Credit cards. You're safe, right? I paused, exhaled, kept my voice steady. She fumbled with her phone, opening her banking app. Her breath caught. It's empty. I clenched my jaw. How much? She swallowed hard. Almost 8,000. 8,000! That wasn't even close to what she owed, but it still hurt. She checked my savings. Then she turned pale, true panic. They took everything. A cold chill ran through me. I strode to the closet, yanked open the door. The small safe we kept inside had been forced open. I blinked. My emergency cash, my passport, gone. I turned back to Claire, ice in my veins. How did they get the code, Claire? She paled. I don't know. Liar. Her voice was low. Try again. I didn't need to. This wasn't a random break-in. They knew exactly where to look. They knew about the safe, the accounts, the jewelry. Claire was silent. Then finally she whispered, I told Vincent. The room tilted. You... I clenched my eyes shut. I pressed my fingers to the bridge of my nose. Claire, you never thought that was a problem? She winced. You assumed he'd realize we didn't have enough? That he'd leave us alone? She nodded. I laughed bitterly. You owe Vincent 50 grand, and your best idea was to tell him where we keep our emergency money? Her bottom lip trembled. You don't gamble with money you don't have, Claire. You don't... I stopped. A darker thought crawled into my mind. My blood turned to ice. I looked around the room again. The forced safe. The missing cash. I met her